Welcome to the Sponsored Rider Club podcast, your guide to motorsports sponsorship. Here's your host, Josh Weesey.
Welcome to the Sponsored Rider Club podcast, which is powered by AMSOIL. I'm excited today because this episode marks the end of 2018 and the beginning of 2019. And in our last episode that we just released, which was live with Travis Pointer, we talked a lot about goal setting. And I felt that this was the exact right time to talk about time-saving tips. Because once you set goals, you then need to come up with a strategy and a tactical way of executing your goals. So we're going to talk about that today and how it relates to your sponsorship program. Before that, though, I need to tell you a few things. First off, AMSOIL. Our partnership is stronger than ever, and they are excited to bring you great products and also podcasts like this. They actually support a number of podcasts out there and a number of race series. So AMSOIL is very committed to making sure that the motorsports community has the information they need to be successful and that they have the access to the great oils and products, but also that they have access to race courses and things like that. So AMSOIL's partnership with us extends well beyond just this podcast. It really is about partnership with you. So again, I am glad to have that on board. That way we can give you the most bang for your buck. If you're getting value out of the show, I would love it if you headed over to iTunes and left a rating and review. That's one of the best ways to give your feedback and also ensure that this show continues to exist. It helps bring a lot more visibility to the show, which then produces more listeners, which then allows us to continue to have sponsorship opportunities like those from AMSOIL and from our other sponsors. Speaking of them, this episode here is brought to you by SolderWeld. They produce game-changing metal bonding technology. TopThePodium.com, they're experts in motorsports sponsorship. Bold Racing, they're a family race team and GSP XTV axle specialists. Neverlift Racing, they create comfortable, race-inspired apparel. Crash Act Industries, they provide human protection and extreme racing products. And I also want to shout out some of our other partners, including MBRP, HMK USA, Studboy Traction, and, of course, GSP XTV. Without further ado, let's hop in. All right, like I said in the intro, this show is about time-saving tips. Specifically, what we're trying to do here is extend the last episode with Travis, the one that we did live, where we talked about how to transform goal setting into some action. And in this case, we're actually going to talk about how to structure that action. So what we talked about there in that show was a couple of things, but one of them, was setting goals, right? This is kind of like the season for goal setting. Coming into a new year, this is the time when you're thinking how can I reinvent myself? How can I reinvent the things that I'm doing? How can I get more stuff done? How can I achieve more? So that's kind of like the time. And a lot of people set New Year's resolutions, and really a New Year's resolution is just a goal, okay? I mean, I have them. I'm sure a lot of people listening right now have New Year's resolutions. That's just a goal. So that's what we talked about in the last episode was goal setting. But now, again, I want to take that and convert it to something that I'm going to call the slight edge. Now, I'm not making that up. The slight edge is something we did talk about in that show with Travis, but it's also a book. It was written by Jeff Olson. It's one that I keep next to me all the time. And actually, a person who studied underneath Jeff Olson wrote another book called The Compound Effect. And essentially what they're saying is the things that you do every single day and the way that you approach every single minute of every day is really going to define who you are as a person and your success long term. Now, the reason why that's important here, the reason why I'm bringing it up is because I think that in order to achieve your goals, whether they're personal goals, maybe that's just your profession, what those goals are, or in this case, probably a lot of people are talking about sponsorship goals. What are they trying to accomplish in 2019 and beyond for the sponsorship program? So these things are very important to establishing how you're going to achieve those major goals that you just set. And the slight edge and the compound effect both essentially say you choose, you make decisions every single day, but you choose how you're going to approach your goal setting and how you're going to approach achieving those goals. So all those things basically over time gain you an advantage if you approach them with discipline and consistent action. Now, we've talked about this in the show before about having, a strategy and having discipline and getting things done. But that's really important from a sponsorship standpoint for a couple of reasons. One, though, that I want to highlight is that in order for you to achieve your goals, you have to have an intense focus, and most people listening to the show are going to be juggling a number of things. So almost everybody has some sort of family life. They have some sort of work that they're trying to do. So maybe they have a day job or a night job that they do outside of their racing program or outside of their riding program. And then, of course, they have their actual racing schedules, their actual riding schedules, and their demands from sponsors. So overall, that is a lot of stuff to keep track of, and it can get overwhelming. Now, that alone in itself, each one of those could have a number of challenges that you face. So if you just have to focus on your family, that's a lot. If you just have to focus on racing, that's a lot. If you just have to focus on your day job, that's a lot. My intent here is to share with you a couple of tips, things that I have learned in the past, and that in many cases I use to get all my stuff done too, because I have a family as well. I do this podcast, and I also have a day job, which is pretty demanding. So in general, I use all of these things to make sure that I can keep my stuff straight and I can keep my head on, and also that I can deliver to my sponsors for the show as well, because they're counting on me for an ROI, just like your sponsors are counting on you for an ROI. So same thing. All right. Again, time-saving tips. What I want to do is break this into 3 parts. Okay, so I'm going to talk about a morning routine, which I think is very crucial. I want to talk about to-do lists, and then I want to talk about some sort of planner or calendar function. So we're going to break this into 3 different topics, and I'm going to try to cover those so that you understand some things that you could do differently, and also just understand like the structure that I use right now to keep my head straight. So first off, the morning routine. Now, I read this book a little while ago. It's called The Miracle Morning. I can't remember the author's name. It was Hal Jordan, or I don't know. Hal Jordan actually sounds kind of like the Green Lantern name, so I don't know if it's Hal Jordan or not. It was Hal something. But either way, he wrote this book, The Morning Routine, and it talked about how you can get more energy and get more stuff done by having some sort of morning routine. Now, he has a whole bunch of details in there, and if you really want to dive into this topic more, feel free to grab that book. I highly encourage it. But just to kind of get the high level structure, I'm going to cover some of that right now. So first off, whether you are a first shift person, a second shift person, third shift person, whatever time you work, it doesn't really matter. The Miracle Morning is all about, some time of day in which you pick to do these things. In my case, and in many cases, it's best when you first wake up to get this stuff done. Now, for me, the way my family life is structured, I get up before anybody else does. So I'm awake and I have absolutely no interactions with humans for a couple of hours. But that's on purpose. So I wake up earlier than everybody else on purpose. But the main thing is, though, set an alarm. Set a time that you are going to wake up and you are going to start doing this routine. So that way you're doing it at the same time every day. Now, the reason why routines are important as well is it helps you to automate and save energy. So if you automate certain decisions, then you can save the energy that you'd normally dedicate to making those decisions. You now have the energy available to do the other things that you need to do. Like maybe it's go to a race, or maybe it is work on your vehicle, or maybe it is make some important decisions about your sponsorship program. But either way, the important thing here to remember is if you automate, you can save that energy for something else that adds more value. All right, so diving in more now to the Miracle Morning, or just a morning routine in general. I already said set alarm, but the next thing is you have to figure out what you're going to do after that alarm is set up. So I recommend actually writing down a routine and assigning time frames to it. So for example, there's a number of things that you can do in a morning. So that's exercise, maybe you meditate, maybe you journal, maybe you do all 3. But I recommend that you write down and you define how much time you're going to spend for each one of those activities. So we'll talk about each one of those activities in a little bit, but I just want you to remember, write this down, and then you hold yourself accountable to it. So let's say you set your alarm for 4 a.m., and this is what I think Travis does, 4 a.m. I do between 4 and 4:30 depending on the day. But the intent is you set that, let's say it's 4 a.m., and then you set a time frame. Okay, I'm going to take 15 minutes to do X activity. I'm going to set 30 minutes to do Y activity. Whatever it is. If you need to be somewhere, at, let's say, 7 a.m. every day, then you need to figure out how much time your morning routine is going to take, and then you need to figure out what time you have to start it so that you can get everything done in that time frame. So I want to start off by talking about exercise. So I think exercise is very important, whether it is for 5 minutes or 60 minutes a day, depending on who's listening and how much you're focused on your own physical prowess, I guess. You're probably already doing exercise. A lot of the listeners on the show are in very good shape because they have a physically demanding activity that they're going to have to do. So especially when it comes to like the motocross side or the ATV side, it's very physically demanding. So maybe you don't need to change what you're doing here. Maybe you're in a good place, but the consistency is really what I want to talk about here. So let's say you don't really have a strong exercise program. I recommend you start and do something. So I have done really well in the past with a 30-minute program that I used to do. I did P90X3, I think it is. And then since then I've done other little exercise programs, but they have ones out there that you can do 7-minute routines, you can do 5-minute routines, just something to get your blood flowing. I know one person that I listen to, he's another podcaster, John Lee Dumas is his name, and he right when he first wakes up does a small routine that takes just a couple of minutes. So he basically rolls out of bed and starts doing push-ups. But really the intent is to do some sort of routine there. And when you do that, sometimes that's coupled with some sort of pre-workout drink or, some sort of hydration, right? Especially water. So either way, I highly recommend you build that in your program. Even if you're not doing a physically demanding cycle, it's still good from a health standpoint. And the healthier you are, the clearer your mind is, the better decisions you can make for your racing program, your riding program, or for your sponsorship program. All right, now the next one, there's probably a lot of people that are going to like roll their eyes at this, but it's a pretty big deal for a number of successful people in the world. I do it as well, but it's meditation. Now meditation, there's like this whole stigma around it, and it can be very complicated, but it doesn't have to be. So I do it 3 minutes a day, 3 minutes. And basically that just means it's 3 minutes where I try not to think about anything, and I just sit there quietly. Even 3 minutes makes a huge difference, but I know some people do it 30 minutes, 60 minutes, whatever. Do your thing. You can do it for 30 seconds. It doesn't matter to me. I just think that it's a good way to help clear your head. Again, this is about making sure that you have the energy focus in the right area. So meditation helps clear your mind and helps refocus that energy. All right, the next thing, which honestly, exercise is probably one of the most important things here, but this might be number 2, and that is journaling. Now, again, I'm going to get some eye rolls here, but I need you to understand how powerful journaling can be. Now, this has probably been one of the things that's changed my life more than anything else over the past 3 years. I started journaling, and I noticed that I became much more positive, much more focused, much more grateful. And there's lots of tips out there for how to journal, but there's something that I follow. It's called the 5-minute journal. You can buy it. I have my own little rendition of it, but it's a simple thing. It's intended to be 5 minutes essentially, where you sit and capture some of your thoughts. Now, there's some specific things that make journaling strong, and one of them is showing gratitude. So essentially that means writing down 3 topics that or 3 things that you're grateful for each day. And then the next thing is affirmations, and that's writing down things that you want to affirm about yourself. And these are generally linked to your goals and your life priorities. So for example, I do 8 affirmations. I'm not going to go through all those, but I write down 8 affirmations each morning. And one of them is, I strive to be an amazing father and husband. That's one of my life priorities. So I write it down every day, and I remind myself that that's important to me. I also put, I will be financially free. And that is one of my longer term goals. Financial freedom to me means I don't have to worry about money as often as I do maybe now, which I'm sure everybody listening can relate to that. But that's something that I write down every morning to remind myself as what I'm trying to accomplish. So there's a number of other things too that I talk about in there. Like I said, I'm not going to go through them all, but this is probably the hardest part, is actually figuring out what your affirmations are going to be. But we could probably have a whole episode just talking about affirmations, but I'm just going to tell you right now, pick things that are action oriented, that are in alignment with your goals, or your long-term priorities, whatever it may be, the things that really speak to you. It can be very simple. I want to grow my sponsorship program, right? You could write that down every day. Actually, better yet, instead of I want to, it should probably say I will grow my sponsorship program. And then the more specific you can make it, the better. So either way, I think the affirmations piece is very, very critical. There's a number of other things you could work into your journal. It could say, what amazing things happened today. So if you do it in reflection, or yesterday, what amazing things happened yesterday. Or you can say what will happen today, or what amazing things can I accomplish today. Any one of those things you could build into your journaling technique. But if you boil it down to the most important things, I think the gratefulness and the affirmations are probably the key ones that you must have. And then everything else, I think, is just a bonus. So either way, I do a number of things. I do a morning and a nightly journal, but essentially I say, I am grateful for blah, 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 and I write down 3 things. And I'll say what would make today great, and then I write down 3 things. And then I do my 8 affirmations. That's my morning part. My nightly routine is what could I have done today to make it better? And then I write down 3 amazing things that happened today. So that's kind of what my routine looks like. There's tons of things out there. If you Google, journaling, you can get a whole bunch of good ideas. Or if you don't even want to worry about getting ideas, you can just buy that 5-minute journal. Don't know how much it is, like $24 on Amazon. Buy one of those, do that. But there's tons of different apps out there for journaling. If you want to be electronic, there's, you can buy a notebook at a store for a couple dollars, which is what I do. And you can just write down your own stuff. But either way, I think that's really, really important. Look, I'm sorry, but I got to admit something. I like to look cool. I like to wear high quality clothing. I like it to be comfortable. And I also like it to portray the values that I also hold true to myself. That's why I like Neverlift Racing. So they were founded in 2013, and they are all about high quality, comfort, and looking cool. So, like I said before, exactly what I'm looking for out of clothing. Admittedly, my favorite shirt of all time is the Neverlift Racing silver badge t-shirt. Like, I wear this thing probably too often because way too many pictures of me on social media are wearing this shirt. Either way, they have a ton more out there. So go get your shirt, your hoodie, your hat, and actually your socks. Probably one of the most comfortable pair of socks I've ever owned too. And they got pretty cool things where it says never on one side, lift on the other. Really cool stuff. Get your apparel. Wear something that supports your values. Live fast, drive hard, Neverlift Racing. 2 questions I get continuously about this show and about sponsorship is, do I need my own website and do I need a resume? The answer is, in my opinion, yes to both, and that's why we partner with TopThePodium.com. Now, if you want to see an example of what a professional website and what a professional resume looks like, you got to check out TopThePodium.com. They did my website. The Sponsored Rider Club Podcast website is sponsoredriderclubpodcast.com. That was created by Jeff Vanistal of TopThePodium.com. I think it's awesome. I get a lot of good feedback about it. And there's a number of other websites out there that Jeff has produced that are just phenomenal. So I think it's important in this world of social media where you have control of your content. That's what a website does. It gives you full control. We don't know what Facebook's going to do sometimes. We don't know what Instagram's going to do. We don't know what Twitter's going to do. So if we don't have that central location to direct people and house our content, there is some risk that we incur. So I strongly recommend getting a website, talking to TopThePodium.com. And then the resume, again, is massive. And if you want to stand out, get it done professionally. And honestly, it is one of the best ways to step up your game and present yourself in the best way possible. Safety is our overriding priority. I hear it all the time, but I have to ask myself, is it though? Is that the first thing we think of? Is that the first thing you think of? Over the past couple of years, we've seen the performance of production UTVs increase, somewhere around 350%. That means these machines give us a lot more opportunity to have fun and win races. but it also, unfortunately, gives us new opportunities to crash. And that's why we have partnered with Crash Addict Industries. The owner, Travis Pointer, became very accustomed to crashing early in his career. He saw it as inevitable, and he set out to make the process safer. With a passion for racing, welding, and engineering, Crash Addict Industries now produces full cage and other protection systems intentionally designed to protect you during an accident on the track. They also offer a line of human protection products through their vendors. Do this for me at this point. If you're racing with a stock cage right now, please go check out crashaddict.com and at least just see what they have to offer. Even if you choose to go with a different company, please make safety your overriding priority.
What's up, everyone? This is Mike Pasquarella, founder of Desert Vets Racing. When the team goes racing, we always have our SolderWeld products with us. Keeping the cars in the fight is our number one concern. With SolderWeld, we can do that. SolderWeld is a leading company in the U.S. for aluminum repair. They specialize in radiator repair on the fly. If you're stuck in the middle of the trail or a race with a hole in your radiator, oil pan, or canister, or even an aluminum line, you can fix it right then and there in a matter of minutes with their AMSOIL aluminum repair rods and flux. It's the only complete and lasting fix in the off-road community. SolderWeld's new UTV off-road kits fit in every ride and are easy to access on the fly.
SolderWeld continues to make a huge positive impact on this industry. So I really encourage you, get in there now. Go to solderweld.us, check out their products, because this stuff is changing the game. Family race team. Those are the first words that come to mind when I think of Bold Racing. And the next one is actually axles. Bold Racing is a premier distributor of GSP XTV axles. And if that wasn't cool enough, they just came out with an entirely new axle called the Revolution axle. It is a hollow tube axle. It's really cool. If you head over to their website, gspxtv.com, or you can find out more at boldracingltd.com, you can find out how this new axle technology works. So they are saying to view this as a fuse for your drivetrain. So the hollow tube CV axle twist technology actually increases the strength and reliability of the axle, and it also reduces stress on the drivetrain. Plus, honestly, it's super cool looking, and if people know me, they know that I really like cool looking stuff. So they come in this really cool gold color. Check it out. It's absolutely revolutionary. All right, so that ends my morning routine section. Now I want to talk about to-do lists, and we talked a little bit about this actually with Travis Pointer in our live show, but I want to dive a little bit deeper. I'm not going to spend a ton of time here, but to-do lists, I think, are incredibly important to making sure that you get the things done that you want to. Now, people have their own systems for to-do lists. I'm going to talk about mine today, but people have, sticky notes that they use. They have, paper planners. They have all sorts of different techniques. There's plenty of paper-based ones. There's plenty of electronic-based ones. Now, I use one recently. I shouldn't say recently anymore. It's probably been over a year that I've been using it, but I found this electronic app called Microsoft To Do, and it has completely changed my life. Probably almost as big as the journaling changed my life, but either way, I now use this electronic app which links to my computer. It's web-based, so I can pull it up on my phone, I can pull it up on my computer, I can pull it up on my tablet at any point, and I jot down the things that I need to do. And it allows me to do a number of things. I can set due dates, which I think is very important. So if I need to get something done by a certain time frame, I can put that in there and I can remind myself to do it. Or if I see that I'm getting a number of overdue tasks, which it happens, then I know that I have too much on my plate as well. Or that some of these things, if they continue to be overdue for a long time, I have to ask myself, are they really that important? Do they even belong on my to-do list? If I'm going to let them slip and slip and slip, do I just completely remove them and refocus on something that's more important? But either way, I've been using this Microsoft To Do app, and basically if someone walks up to me in the middle of the day, or if I get an email, or if I get just this random idea, I put it down. I put it on my to-do list. I have different categories. I have one that's podcast. I have one that is my day job. I have one that's just general tasks that I need to do for, my home. I have one that's general vehicle tasks. I have ones that are, I probably have about 9 or 10 different categories that I use regularly. And, I'm not telling you got to go to this depth, but I'm just telling you that having all these things helps me compartmentalize what I need to do, and it helps keep me focused. So I have all these different categories. And then what the to-do list does, which I think is great, is I pick the things each morning that I'm actually going to work on. So I have this thing that pops up called suggestions, and it basically tells me like, hey, here's all the things that you kind of want to do. Pick the ones that you want to do today. So I'll scroll through and say, yep, add to my day, add to my day, add to my day. And what it will do is give me essentially a to-do list for that day. And it has been tremendous. So I'll look at my to-do list for that day only. So let's say I put 5 things on that list. Everything else, let's say if I have 30 other tasks or 40 other tasks, they're just sitting idle and I don't even look at them. I only look at the 5 things that I decided to do that day, which has been helpful to focus. And also I don't have to try to keep all of those other 40 things on the top of my mind. I can just kind of forget about them right now because I know the app is going to remind me. So I don't have to think about them, which is giving me a lot more energy to focus on the right things. So either way, I think that app is phenomenal. I highly encourage you to do some research on it, whether you use that app or other ones, but just do some research on to-do lists and figure out which method works best for you. I actually have a couple of things I want to add to it. No matter what method you use, you do need to prioritize. Just like I said before, you'll notice that some of your to-do list items aren't getting done regularly, and you have to question yourself, are those really that important to you if they continue to slip? Or do you have way too much on your plate in general? But either way, prioritization is very important. Sometimes I'll load up my to-do list at the beginning of the day, and halfway through the day I realize if I put 15, 20 tasks on there, I realize I'm only actually going to do one. So I start removing them from my list, as the day goes on. So I'm prioritizing throughout the day. But yeah, the last thing I really want to say about this is I highly encourage that you have one list for everything. So I talked a little bit about like categorizing things, but I think it's important that you have one life list. So, if you're one of those people that has the family and then has the racing program and then also has the day job to balance, and who knows, maybe it's other things too, maybe you got religious activities, or you're part of Boy Scouts or Girl Scouts, or, it could be a number of other things. I encourage you have them all on one list. So when I go down my to-do list, the ones that I set for each day, it could say, record episode for time-saving tips for my podcast. And then right below that, it could say something I need to do for my day job. And then it might say, hey, remember, you got to get dog food today. And that could be on there. And then it says, hey, make sure you change the oil in your snowmobile and, make sure that you put AMSOIL in it. Sorry, that was my other little plug there. But the important thing is here, it's all in one list for you to do each day. There is no separation in your life. I think it's important to compartmentalize, but truly there isn't really that much separation. You still live your life each day, and you still have to get a number of things done. So it just depends on where you're going to spend your time and energy at. So either way, I think that's important. I guess I lied because I said that this is going to be the last thing on this topic, but I have one other thing I want to add, and that's an extension of what we talked about with Travis Pointer. With your to-do list, really what it is it's just breaking your larger goals down into smaller ones. So if you have these massive goals that are, 3, 5, 10 years out, you need to make sure that you're doing something, each week or each day towards that. And this helps break those things down and get some control over it. All right, that's the last thing I was going to say around the to-do list. The last one I want to talk about, though, for this whole podcast is having a calendar. So some people use planners, combined with to-do lists. Some people use calendars combined with to-do lists. Some people use electronic or, paper. It's all the same to me. The point is that you have to have something that manages your time. So to-do list manages your tasks. Calendars manage your time. Now, I think the best systems out there are completely integrated. So if it's a paper system, if you can go to that one spot and get all the information, I think you got stuff figured out, right? I've had successful paper systems in the past. I just recently went full electronic with this to-do list with Microsoft To Do. So now I'm actually trying to look at better ways to integrate those things into my calendar. So I don't have the best integration right now. I use primarily Microsoft Outlook in my day job, and that manages my, first 12 hours of my day or something like that. So that manages all my time of when I get ready, when I'm traveling to work, when I am doing my different tasks at work. But I separate that from my personal activities, which I include the podcast as my personal activity. But beyond that, I have a separate calendar that manages my other time. So all of my recording times are scheduled through an automated app called Acuity Scheduling. So every time someone comes on this show, they have signed up automatically through this system, and that sends me reminders and automatically syncs to my personal calendar, which I use just a Google Calendar for that. And it will tell me when all the recording times are. It also creates a reminder for the guest, and that basically I can pull up my calendar at any point and see when my next recording is, and then if something needs to change, the guest can change that, or I can change that, and we're both notified automatically. But really the important thing here, I'm not going to talk in this case about a specific tool. It's more that you just have something that manages your time pretty closely. So I even have the morning routine kind of broken down into these different time slots, so I know when I look at the clock if I am ahead or behind my schedule. So I think that's important to maintaining a number of things with your sponsorship and your riding or racing program. So just one example is, let's say you need to make a guest appearance at an event. You want that on a calendar so you don't miss it. Let's say you need to record a podcast with somebody else during a certain time. You want to make sure you don't miss that. And probably the last one I'll talk about here, just from the calendar that's important, is scheduling when you're going to do your social media post. Some people are really, really good at doing these just naturally or throughout the day. I am not as good at that. I need to have some sort of structure to it. So I used my analytics within my social media profiles to know when there are the best times for me to post. And I will create posts consistently at those times, or at least try to. But I use a calendar to help me manage that. So I think, again, the best calendar, the best planner system integrates your to-do list. I don't quite have that figured out yet, but if you can come up with that system, or if you already have one, continue to use that. If you're researching, try to find when it's all integrated. I think that is the best method. And again, similar to what I said with the to-do list, if you have one calendar for everything, I think that is phenomenal. I haven't figured that out, but if you do stick with it, I think that's phenomenal. I actually first learned about this whole linking everything together, one list for everything, from a former executive at Disney. He came in and spoke at one of my previous places of employment, and this is the only thing he was talking about was time management tips. And he completely blew my mind at that time, which it seems crazy now, but it seems so simple. But it really blew my mind about how he said, look, if I need to get flowers for my wife, I'm writing that down on the same list of where it says, I need to give a speech to a crowd, and I'm writing it down on the same list that says I need to complete my expense reports. He's like, they are all integrated because you are one person and you need to manage all aspects of your life using the same tool. So in his case, he used a paper planner, calendar, to-do list in one. And, obviously he was a high-ranking executive at Disney at the time, and he'd accomplished some pretty great things. So I felt like listening to him was a good idea. All right, so that's really what I wanted to cover in this episode. And just to kind of summarize, what we're doing here in this show was trying to take the conversation we had with Travis Pointer the other night around goal setting and give you some time-saving tips on how to make those goals a reality. So, again, quick summary here. Morning routine, I think it's critical. I don't even care if you do it in the morning, but I think it's very critical to have some sort of routine set up where you do the exercise, you have your meditation, you do your journaling. I think it's critical. To-do list, extremely helpful in keeping your tasks in order, and then having a calendar or some sort of planner so that you plan when you're going to do those tasks. I think all these things are very important for you to, I guess, form a system of accomplishing the goals that you set. And trust me, not only yourself, like you're going to appreciate this, but your sponsors are going to appreciate this as well. If you can consistently deliver on the things that you have committed to, I think that's going to make a huge difference. Plus, if you can streamline your day-to-day activities and then be able to refocus on the things that are most important and get those things done, gosh, it feels good. So I think you're going to enjoy that if you don't already enjoy it now. Well, I really appreciate you taking the time to listen to this episode. I know the last 2 audio shows that I have done have been different from any of the other ones I've done in the past. I just kind of been reflecting on the past 2 years of this podcast and looking at some of the things that maybe we have missed. So I'm trying to change things up a little bit to make sure that you have the full story. We are going to continue to have interviews. I've got a number of guests lined up, so trust me, those are still coming. You're still going to hear people's stories. You're still going to hear their personal advice. I just might sprinkle in from time to time the things that I found really important to my success or really important to the success of the people around me or people that I admire. So I'm going to share some of those tips as we go through, and hopefully that adds value for you as well. I want to remind you, please subscribe so that you don't miss upcoming episodes. Again, I said we got a lot coming up in the near future, but that's the best way to make sure that they will automatically download to your phone or your tablet or whatever you listen to them on. And then follow us on social media, specifically Facebook. That's where we do our live shows. Again, we just had Travis Pointer on, and he crushed it in the goal setting. We also had Jared Heshka on recently of MBRP. But yeah, that's where we do our live shows. Those are a lot of fun. People come on there. They can interact with the guests. It's the best way to interact with me as well. Now, special thanks goes out to our sponsors, AMSOIL, Neverlift Racing, SolderWeld, Bold Racing, TopThePodium.com, and Crash Addict Industries. And I also want to shout out some of our other partners, GSP XTV, MBRP, HMK USA, and Studboy Traction. I look forward to serving you again next week. Until then, have fun and ride safe.